Back in 2015, Square Enix released a Final Fantasy XV demo known as Episode Duscae. This came exclusively with physical copies of Final Fantasy Typo HD. Inside came a code that you could redeem to finally get a taste test of 15, which came a whopping 9 years after the initial release of Versus 13. I'd say that this in itself probably boosted the sales of Typo HD. A lot of people probably weren't even interested to play Typo, they simply just wanted a little slither of 15. Now the game would get a public demo available for everyone to download off the PlayStation Store exactly 1 year afterwards in March of 2016. This was known as the Platinum Demo and is more or less a dream of Noctis's, though unfortunately now this has been completely delisted. You can no longer play this, and it is its own self-contained thing. But Episode Duscae was a lot more substantial, giving players a small chunk of the Duscae region to explore, more or less serving as a demonstration as to what people can expect from the full product. This demo though is interesting for a number of reasons, mainly that it released in March of 2015. This is more than a year before the full game would release in November of 2016. This means that this is the earliest playable build of Final Fantasy XV, and there are some serious differences between this version of the game and the full version of the game. I thought it would be super interesting to compare both versions of the game here to see what kind of changes Square Enix made between early 2015 to late 2016. Just note that the full version of 15 that I have on display here is the PC version, running with the official 4K texture pack. You should know that the PC version does come with some additional eye candy effects, but I thought it would be most interesting to compare the most definitive version of the game to the earliest playable version of the game. We're going to be breaking down the visuals, the gameplay, and the story of the demo and see how it is different to that of the full version, so be sure to stick around. So let's begin at the entrance to the Duscae region, Koenig's gas station. Now aside from the obvious, with the fact that Episode Duscae here runs at 900p resolution and the PC version here is running at 4K, there are some pretty staggering differences. The main things you'll probably notice is the change of landscape, whether it be the removal of some vegetation or the addition of more vegetation, whether it be bushes, trees, more shrubs on the ground. Square Enix really did remorph a lot of the Duscae region, where some spots look entirely different in the full build, especially with the additions of more rock mounds and more groups of trees. One of the pieces of feedback that I remember players giving towards the demo was that it did feel quite barren, so I guess that Square Enix literally took this on board and filled out the world. Now walking into Koenig's station, you'll notice that Square Enix changed up the cars that are currently parked, and also the caravan's position is different. That's because in Episode Duscae, the diner hadn't been developed. So rather, the caravan in the demo is where the diner is positioned. Walking into the gas station, immediately the first thing I notice is in the demo, we don't have the American Express credit card logo stickered on the outside. So this was obviously before Square Enix had formed their partnership with American Express for Final Fantasy XV, but otherwise, the interior looks almost basically the same, pretty much unchanged, other than the lighting inside interiors was a little bit brighter, so they kind of toned that down for the full version. But you'll notice that overall, the lighting and the tinge of the demo is quite a bit different compared to that of the final build. The final build is definitely more vibrant, a little bit more saturated. It doesn't feel as drab. I'm happy that Square Enix made this change because the colors in the demo seem like they are washed out. Something though interesting you'll notice about this footage right here is that for some reason Square Enix nerfed Noctis's hair physics. They are absolutely better the way they bounce and react to Noctis's movements here in the demo, which is crazy because the PC version got some additional hair physics technology known as NVIDIA Hairworks, and even with that enabled, the hair physics here in the demo definitely look better. Out the back of the gas station is kind of crazy to look at. It's almost as if I'm in two entirely separate locations. The demo's mountain ranges were very naked, and there is a whole ass rock and power pole along with some gorillas that do not exist in the final build. Now, walking down the slope across the road from the gas station, you're gonna start to notice some massive changes here. Instantly, like, the grass is dead. It's brown in episode Duscae versus the much lusher, greener looking grass. Also keeping in mind that I have NVIDIA Turfworks enabled for the PC version. Just a quick note about the meteor off in the distance. For the PC version here, it's not there because I have already defeated Titan, whereas episode Duscae takes place before you encounter Titan. But look at the mass amount of like additional vegetation that Square Enix added, especially if we're looking into the background. The backgrounds were definitely underdeveloped when looking at episode Duscae. It's very clear that this, even though it was about a year before the full release of the game, a lot of the background and decorative aspects of this region just hadn't been finished just yet. Keeping in mind though that the PC version is obviously going to have much better draw distances and LOD, even compared to the final build of the PlayStation 4 version. But still, it is absolutely apparent just how barren a lot of episode Duscae actually feels. It's worth looking at the gorilla here, because here in the PC version, obviously the gorilla's got full-blown 3D hair physics, versus episode Duscae where it's just one flat texture. There's a few landscape changes here, like the addition of more bushes for the final build, along with the removal of some rocks. It's interesting looking at this because the episode Duscae version looks like I'm looking at a Nintendo Switch version of 15, and the right version looks like I'm looking at a PlayStation 4 version of 15. If you weren't convinced at just how brown episode Duscae is, then I'm sure that this comparison will completely change your mind, because good lord. I want to say that episode Duscae still looks pretty okay, given that it came out in 2015, but the cleanup effort, the polishing that took place from Square Enix for the final version is pretty staggering, honestly. One thing that stands out to me is definitely the use of bloom within episode Duscae that was just totally toned down for the final build. You'll notice up in the sky, it is just a complete white glow. It looks absolutely awful. Clearly Square Enix changed a lot to do with the lighting system of Luminos engine between 2015 to 2016, as there is just too much bloom and exposure coming from the sun's light source here in the demo. Are you convinced now? Because that sunset looks like Bahamut's about to summon Zeta Flare. I definitely appreciate me some god rays, but honestly, these were just too much in the demo. They still do exist for the final build, and they look absolutely fantastic. Also, I will say that the demo's water visuals here are still really top notch. I don't think they actually changed too much to do with the water for the final game. Running up to the Ulsace Haven here, you'll notice a couple of differences. Number one, in the final build, they added some paw prints of the behemoth, just to show that the behemoth is kind of lurking around this area. The rock that this campsite sits on looks a little bit different. Initially you could get up to it from the front, but you kind of have to move around the back. Talking about camping, the visual effect around the campfire is different here in the demo compared to the full version. Indignos would make a random food item based on what ingredients you currently have in your inventory. Here we've got egg in a basket. I found the exact same food item in the full version, and honestly, like, the visuals of the food still look incredibly good here in episode Duscae. There's basically no visible changes. Food would still provide buffs. Here the egg in a basket gave us both fresh and sharp, which would be displayed on the health bars, similar to the final version. Though the HUD here in the demo definitely does look different, Square Enix ended up changing it for the final build. Interestingly, in episode Duscae, there was no duration on the food buffs. They just last for the entire day. There's not much going on with the camping here. It just basically progresses the time of day forward. You've only got two options, rest or you can spar with Gladio. At this stage, Square Enix hadn't implemented Prompto's photo taking, so you don't get to choose any photos. Here we're taking the exact same path during the exact same time of day from the haven closest to Wiz's Chocobo farm, running all the way up to the farm itself. The weapons truck at the Chocobo farm is not present in the demo, as you couldn't purchase any weapons, and this is a great shot to show how the shadows of the tree branches behind Noctis are affecting his character model compared to what's going on in the demo. Over the road from the Chocobo farm is the Chocobo racing track, and this just wasn't present at all in the demo. Clearly Square Enix hadn't developed it, and eventually you'll end up hitting an invisible barrier that pretty much says you're at the limits of the demo. To give you an idea of the size of the explorable space in the demo, here is the map. Another interesting tidbit about the demo is it couldn't rain. At this point in development, Square Enix hadn't quite finished up the weather tech for the world. Square did mention that they wanted to add weather to the demo, but unfortunately they ran out of time. This shot here is a great example of just how much of 15 was unfinished by March of 2015. So much more flavor was added into the environment for the final build. And initially looking at episode Duscae, it was a little bit worrying just how barren and almost empty feeling these environments were. Something I noticed when running along this road is the Rock of Ravito, the mountain off in the distance, is not present in episode Duscae. So I'm assuming that Square Enix just hadn't finished it at this stage. Now looking at the meteor crater, there's actually something interesting about Duscae, and that's that the model of Titan actually exists within the demo. Players managed to discover how to get out of the map, and making your way over to the meteor, you can actually come across a crouching Titan holding the stone up. I also noticed that the final build's nighttime is a lot darker. You can definitely see further ahead of you during night in the demo than you can with the final build. And for some reason, Square Enix changed the color of Noctis's flashlight from blue in the demo to I guess a more realistic looking white for the final build. The end section of Faux Shore Cavern was extended in the final version of the game. This was likely to accommodate the boss fight that takes place here that isn't present in the demo. So that's a look at some of the changes that took place within the world of the demo along with its visuals. Honestly speaking, I still think that the demo is pretty visually impressive, all things considered. It definitely does have some rough edges, and Square Enix undeniably glowed this game up for its final release, but visually speaking, it is impressive just considering that this was very much a work in progress at the time of its release. So moving over to the gameplay side of things, the combat system is relatively close to that of the final version. Not too much was changed, but there are some important key differences here. The biggest one is a customizable weapon combo system. Here in the demo, you can pretty much craft how you want your combo to play out, depending on your currently equipped weapons. There are 5 different slots here: Crush, Ravish, Vanquish, Counter, and Descend. Crush will be the first attack that's activated when you start attacking. As you can see here, I've got the Zui Hunter Greatsword equipped, so as soon as I begin my combo, it will start with the Greatsword. The Ravage slot is the weapon that will be used for the rest of the combo's duration. So here I've got Partisan, meaning that I'll start off by swinging the Greatsword, and the rest of the combo will play out by me stabbing with the Partisan Spear. The counter slot is pretty self-explanatory. Any weapon in here will be summoned when performing a counter, and the Descend slot will be used when jumping and attacking. Now I'm not too sure what the Vanquish slot is for. It could be used as a combo finisher or under special circumstances. Now as we know, in the final build of the game you can have 4 different weapons equipped, and the combo of the weapon is dependent on what weapon type you're using, but that's really as far as the combo system goes. it seems a little bit in-depth here, with the original idea of the combo system allowing players to actually craft their own combos. Sure, it's not super in-depth, but at least it does have some depth to it. In a way, this sort of reminds me of Kingdom Hearts' ability system, where depending on which action abilities you currently have activated will change Sora's combo. Weapons also come with a unique special attack that can be selected using the D-pad and activated by pressing triangle. Bloodsword has Drain Blade, an attack that restores both MP and HP. Wyvern Lance has Dragoon Jump, allowing you to jump up into the air and to come crashing down. Partisan has Full Thrust, allowing you to thrust forward. And Zweihander has Tempest, a greatsword spin attack. These special abilities require MP in order to pull off, but I like this system. It's such a more unique take on the weapons of Final Fantasy XV compared to what we got. And considering that Noctis's core ability allows him to summon forth weapons at will, this is a system that thematically fits Noctis's powers so much better than what we ended up getting. Weapons also have different tiers as well. This system's never explained in the demo though, so I'm unsure what exactly it represents. Most likely a power scale of each weapon. Perhaps maybe there was going to be a weapon leveling system. You can also completely configure your weapon setup mid-combat as well. So for instance, if a particular combo setup just wasn't working for a certain combat situation, you could change it no problem mid-fight. Now while you can't select it in the demo, it also looks like the same could have been done for your party members. We don't have any idea how customizable or what even customization looked like for the party members at this point in development, but you can see the menu does say group gear, so that makes me think that there would have been some things we could have changed around for our party members whilst in combat. Interestingly too, the battle menu here will also display the names of all of the different enemies you are currently fighting. Now look, surely there would have been a reason why the team ultimately decided to rip this out and just replace it with something a little bit more basic, where you choose which weapon you want to have equipped, and that's basically as far as it goes. There is still weapon comboing potential in the final build, but it's definitely not as customizable as something like this in episode Duscae, along with also the lack of special weapon abilities as well. I'm going to assume that the party member technique attacks ended up just replacing the weapon ability system, but to be fair, I think I really would have preferred Noctis's very own activatable special attacks compared to the party member technique attacks. It also gives MP more of a purpose outside of just being used to both warp strike and dodge. Cross-training was added into the demo with an update. It does work a little bit differently here in the demo. One of your party members will mark down a sort of glowing circle on the ground next to a fallen enemy, and you have to run to it, press triangle to activate the cross-chain. For every 3 cross-chain attacks you pull off, you'll be able to activate an upgraded version of a special finisher, which again is different to how cross-chaining works in the final game. It's really just keep pressing button and keep smacking enemy. It looks like the armature system was going to be a little bit different as well. As we know, in the final game, it's this special mode that you can activate that allows Noctis to use all of his weapons in very quick successions. It's basically like a final form. But here in the demo, the idea of this is it looks like you could unlock different types of armatures. There's only one here, and it's known as Aquesero, and this one allows you to warp strike along with dodging. So rather than the system being a final form of sorts, depending on which type of armature you would have equipped, seems like it would give you different special unique abilities to activate. Dodging is a little bit different here. Rather than holding down square, you hold down L1, and while you're in the dodge guard mode, you'll see that it creates this depth of field effect. This was removed for the final game, and it took me so long to figure out how to dodge roll, but you have to hold down L1 and press circle rather than just tapping square. Also, the lock-on system. Why did they change this? Because it's in fact better in the demo. In order to hard lock on, you just hold down R1, whereas in the final build, you have to hold down R1 and click in the analog stick, which is super annoying. There's also no option to change how hard lock on works. I will never understand the decision behind this change. You'll notice how Square Enix changed the look of the health bars for enemies. In the demo, there is a grey border with red bars, whereas in the final build, they are more sleek, slimline looking health bars that display not only the enemy's name, but also their level. The demo here has different different looking weapon hit effects. They definitely improved these for the final version. One last thing I noticed is that party members will point out different like points of interest as you're just sort of like walking around in the world that you can press triangle to focus on. And these are pretty basic things like signposts that sort of point towards a location or an activity within the environment. They don't really tend to do that in the final game. They definitely do when you're in the regalia driving around, or they'll suggest that you pull over to maybe get a photo of something, but this is definitely less common in the final game compared to what we see in the demo. Those are all of the things that I noticed that are different in the gameplay department of things. Otherwise, the combat system still remains pretty much basically the exact same as it does within the 2016 version of 15. There are definitely some questionable changes that have been made here. Kinda hurts to know that this game had a really cool weapon system, and for whatever reason, Square Enix decided to trash it. I'd like to think there is a good reason for it. Maybe there were aspects of it that just weren't working, but I think that this would have added an additional layer that I think the 15 combat system so desperately needs, so it's unfortunate to see that it got scrapped. Last up here is the story, because believe it or not, episode Duscae actually contains a totally unique scenario. Square Enix made this for the sole purpose of the demo itself. This event isn't found in the main game whatsoever. So the general setup here is that the regalia has broken down in the Duscae region, and we have to raise 24,000 gil in order to pay Cindy to repair the car to press the journey forward. The quickest way that we're going to be able to raise the funds for the repairs is to take down Deadeye, the behemoth that lurks in the woods of the Duscae region, as we can sell that horn for 25,000 gil. Now that is the main quest of this demo. There are a few other quests that are scattered around the region. It's all pretty basic stuff like go off and kill a bunch of monsters or find A, B, C, or D. It is required that you actually do a bit of exploring, fight some enemies, and do some other smaller minuscule quests though, because if you just straight beeline it for Deadeye, you will get your ass handed to you. Mainly because Deadeye has an insane amount of health. It's recommended that players do level up before taking on this boss. He's a lot harder here in the demo than he is in the full game, but this is interesting because we know that for the full version of the game, you go to Wiz's Chocobo post, and that's where you'll pick up the hunt to take down the behemoth, whereas here, we're taking down the behemoth for the sole purpose of raising money. This is really cool though, because we've got some exclusive cutscenes that are only shown here in the demo, like the group waking up in their tent after camping for the night, mentioning the predicament that they're currently in, or it's Cindy at the Enix station repairing the regalia. None of this happens in the full game, so technically this isn't canon at all to the story of 15. But it's cool to have this alternate take on what could have happened upon the group stumbling into the Duscae region with the regalia breaking down. So that's a bit of a dive into Final Fantasy XV episode Duscae. It's definitely a cool relic of 15's history. I almost forgot that I had this on my PlayStation 4 and remembered I did and absolutely had to see it again for myself, and I'm glad I did. There are a ton of changes here compared to the final version. It's not often that developers release a playable build or demo of their game so far out from the full release date, and in cases that they do, sometimes you end up getting quite a different version of the game compared to the final product. So I am absolutely glad that this exists. Thank you so much for tuning into today's video. It would mean the world to me if you slippity slap that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. A big shout out to my wonderful patrons and YouTube members. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll talk again real soon.